Now, Sean, as a teenager, you did various bits of TV work before being signed up to a major soap at 16. What was that like?
Weird. I was 16, in London for the first time and earning money, but I was still growing up. I'd intended to go to drama school, but they kept extending my contract because my character was so popular, so that didn't happen. I was even offered a recording contract at one point, though I can't sing.
So it wasn't so great?
I feel much more relaxed about it now, looking back, but at the time I was just thinking this wasn't the way my career was meant to be going. So I quit. I was 18 and it wasn't what I wanted in life. People said I was making a big mistake, that I'd sink without a trace.
But you didn't?
No, though I still get a bit pigeonholed as the pretty soap star, and 9 times out of 10 when I get sent scripts, I can guess which part they want me to play, so I go for that 10th one every time. But actually I've been pretty lucky, getting quite a bit of film and theatre work, so I can't complain.
When I first began editing tape years ago, I was fascinated by how much you can tell from a voice. You know, tension, passion, uncertainty. Sitting late at night cutting and tidying up recordings, hearing the ums and ers and breaths and laughs and moments of emotional hesitation through my headphones, I'd feel quite intimate with the person I was working on. Did you find that, Jane?
Absolutely. And that means you have a responsibility to ensure, first of all, that the edited version makes sense, but also that it sounds like the person. So sometimes you put back a few of the ums and ers and pauses.
That's right, because let's face it, on the radio, voices really matter.
When I started out, people had really fixed ideas about what made a good radio voice, and I didn't have one, or so I was told, and that I'd never make a radio performer. That's why I went into editing.
Just goes to show how things have moved on, doesn't it?
I suppose it does.
I mean, you were brought up in Africa, so going back, did you find it had changed?
In many ways, not at all. There's still plenty of empty space that it's possible to get lost in. Areas where mobile phones don't work and there's no internet access. We live in a world where anyone can find you any time and say, I need your 500 words by the 30th. In Africa, you can be inaccessible in an invasive world.
Sounds like the sort of thing kids do on their gap year.
It's a bit tougher than that, actually, especially going alone as I did. It's not something to be taken on lightly, and it certainly wasn't a holiday.
Right. We hear a lot about development, and there's all the charity work going on, so I thought you might have noticed some results of all that.
I think a lot of that hype is actually counterproductive. Unless Africans themselves are involved in the projects, they don't do any good. Small-scale projects seem to work, things with local involvement, rather than a big international profile. But I didn't go looking for development or projects. That wasn't my brief.
Hello, my name's Stella Folds, and in this evening's edition of What Makes Us Tick, we're looking at the issue of clumsiness. Have you ever wondered why it is that some people are very precise and graceful in their physical movements, while others are always bumping into things and falling over? It seems to have very little to do with intelligence, because some of my cleverest friends are clumsy, but they're very good at other things in life. Does any of this sound familiar to you? What started me on this train of thought was reading a description in a biography of a distant relative of mine called John, who lived in the last century. It said, John's smart appearance belied a lack of physical coordination that could lead to drama. He regularly fell into rivers and lakes, and household objects, such as vases and table lamps in other people's homes, were not safe when he was around. Well, in a nutshell, that's me too. Even as a child, I was always good at drawing, and people still comment on my speed and agility at anything requiring careful work with the hands. I can cook, make my own clothes, and have neat handwriting. Why is it then that I was always walking into doors and tripping over the edges of carpets? Why was I never able to do gymnastics? And why have I always been so hopeless at any sports which use a ball? Nor does this sort of thing entirely seem to run in families. Adam, my younger brother, is, by contrast, quite good at the sporty kind of things. I've watched him playing tennis with his friends and feel not so much jealous as rather frustrated at seeing the ease with which he plays. He'll never be a champion, but at least he doesn't make a fool of himself like me. But there again, Adam is well known in the family for having what have become known amongst us as little accidents. The latest one happened in a smart department store in London. As I stepped off the escalator on the 4th floor, I heard Adam fall over with a thud behind me. Somehow his shoelace had got caught in the moving staircase and he'd tripped up. He was all right, but we couldn't get his trainer free, and in the end he had to take it off and call for help. Why do things like this always happen to him, and why do I always manage to drop anything of value that I pick up? Is it just a way of attracting attention? Or is it because I'm rather short on the things called motor skills? You know, the ones the brain is meant to pick up in infancy. If any listeners have any thoughts on the matter, I'd love to hear from you. The number to ring is 0800...
Speaker 1.
It was during a public transport strike. I was stuck in a cab, running late for an appointment with a patient, a leading politician. As we passed a showroom window, I saw this moped, and so I jumped out of the cab, rushed in, and 15 minutes later, the sale was complete. I'd had one as a teenager, so I knew how to operate it. I made the appointment on time, and I haven't looked back since. It's not made for speed, but you can still glide past cars in jams, so it doesn't seem slow. It's increased my productivity, critical in these days of financial stringency in the health service, as I couldn't fit in as many consultations without it.
Speaker 2.
My father drove for a living and was also a keen amateur racer, and so for me, the cars came before the drum kit, actually. But thanks to my success with the band, I've been able to indulge my passion. I started with a 1927 Austin, which I only paid £20 for. I was 17 and learnt the rudiments of mechanics on that. My father's view was that part of the fun of running old cars was getting them working. I've got more than 30 at the moment, including the Austin, and some of them were his. Speed in itself has never been the big thing. It's more about getting the maximum from the car and beating the competition.
Speaker 3.
I cycle to the office every day. I started after I got fed up with being squashed like a sardine in the tram. My bike's a cross between a mountain bike and a racer, which I put together myself from various old bikes. Cycling's very invigorating. It's healthy and really sets me up for dealing with difficult situations. You get plenty of those working with the homeless. Although I view cycling as doing my bit towards conserving resources, it's hardly a political statement. I love going out in the car at weekends. Just because you do this kind of work doesn't mean you can't enjoy pleasures like that. Fortunately, my husband's got his own business, so we can afford it.
Speaker 4.
Modern cars are technically better, they go faster, but they don't have character. They're part of the faceless homogeneity of life today. I wish I'd lived in the first half of the 20th century, when my present car was built by hand. Life then had more style and individualism, and not only for the ruling classes. I used to have a wonderful collection of about 50 individually designed vintage cars, which I opened to the public at weekends, but when the recession hit my firm, I had to sell them all, just to keep afloat. So I've lost fortunes as well as made them, but that's what being an entrepreneur is about, so I have no regrets.
Speaker 5.
I've got quite a large bike, actually, but I'm not a passionate enthusiast. I got into it when I was a starving law student and a car was beyond my means. 20 years later, I still ride one every day when visiting clients. It's a very cost-effective way of getting about. The more weight and power you have, the easier it is to get free of the traffic. But I don't go in for speed much. I believe in wearing all the gear, though, which puzzles people. Sometimes I'll turn up for lunch with a company chairman that I'm going to represent in court and get directed to the mail room because they take me for a dispatch rider.